All right, filming the garden question and answer video a little bit later than normal. I don't know if the sun is going to run me out of this spot. We will see soon enough. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video, and we pick from those each week. Steph wrote down 20 something and plus some extras. So we have, usually over the course of 3 or 4 weeks, we end up with an extra set of questions. I also still want to do a live Q&A, and I talked about it like a month ago, but then we got so busy with the open garden that I didn't get around to it. Thank you to everyone who visited last weekend, the open garden event here. It was unbelievable, and including Juniper Level. I know he had a lot of folks come on Friday and did some shopping as well. And so, I know Tony was out there greeting folks, so that was kind of fun. We talked about earlier in the week, we are again next year doing the open garden event here, likely the 3rd weekend in June. We'll put the tickets up later. Juniper Level will still be open on Friday like it was this year, and then we're going to have a Thursday evening event for anyone who's interested. I met with Mark Wethington last night. It will be a fundraiser entirely for the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. There'll be a limited number of tickets. Tim Alderton, who you guys have seen on the channel before in a video, and Mark Wethington, and then Greg Page, who I want to get on the channel at some point. He's tremendous hort knowledge that Greg has. The 3 of them plus me will be leading some sort of group event at the Ralston. Maybe some speakers, maybe some touring. I don't know what that's going to look like right now, but no matter what, it'll be a fun evening over at the Ralston, and there'll be a limited number of tickets for that. All of that money will be going to the Ralston directly, and again, met with them last night about that. So working on those ideas to include the Ralston, Juniper Level, and then of course people went to Duke Gardens, they went to the North Carolina Botanic Garden, they went to Big Bloomers, someone did a downtown food tour in Raleigh, so people came and really took in all of what Raleigh has to offer. So you know, there is a lot to do here, and we're lucky to have this many gardens in such a small space. So anyway, thank you guys so much for participating, and then being so gentle in the garden. There was literally not one thing out of place, basically, after all those folks, you know, came through the garden. So thank you for being light on the garden as well. Let's see, we have 4 new t-shirts. I put them on Instagram the other day. There's this HortTube with Jim Putnam t-shirt. There's one for Griffin, which is really kind of funny. It's got dirt being thrown around him, and we know which is truly gardening with Griffin. And we have a new hosta collector shirt and a conifer collector t-shirt that says Conifer Crew. Those are now over on the website, and all of the older t-shirts are discounted as well, you know, with the new ones coming in. And we have a woman's t-shirt. Within the next week and a half or so, there'll be a new women's t-shirt as well. That one just hasn't come in yet, with another V-neck like the other women's t-shirt that we have. Okay. And then today, I think as you're watching this, is the last day for the $50 off the Learn to Garden video series and the weekly garden planner. Thank you guys who have purchased it, who have considered it, who have bought it in the past. We really appreciate it. The weekly garden planner is a week-by-week garden planner. And you know, what to do each week, and the Learn to Garden video series is starting with the basics of garden up through design. Steph has done a bunch of 4 design videos and more to come in that series. Okay, getting to some gardening questions finally. Last week I was too hard on green giant arborvitae, and the reason I'm hard on green giant arborvitae is I can just see the future. You know, if we're lining up rows of 40s of things, you know, what that looks like in the future. You know, the things that have been overplanted over the 40 years I've been in this business, I can just see, as great a plant as that is, you know, you can just see sometime in the future these things that get overplanted end up, you know, in some sort of weird way. The conversation about crepe myrtles, you know, we've seen issues with crepe myrtles now. There have been so many planted. We're seeing, you know, Leyland cypress, red tip photinia, you know, just in general roses, in the history of people planting roses all over the globe, and so on and so forth. So I just, you know, but I am a little hard. I'm not necessarily. I'm taking out my somewhat frustration of monoculture planting on a single plant. And that's unfair to green giant arborvitae, because it is a great plant. It's a very useful plant for sure. The very first question was about, do green giants take well to shaping? And I had said that, yes, I got a neighbor over here that keeps his about 12 feet tall. He gets up on a ladder and just shears the top of them. Most Arborvitae are capable of doing that. The eastern Arborvitae, the Thuja occidentalis, you go up to Canada and people just have them hedged 8 feet tall and 6 feet wide. You definitely want to keep them on that angle coming down. These conifers are shaped like Christmas trees for a reason, so that they get the light all the way to the bottom. Where you'll struggle is if you start cutting them at 90 degrees and the light doesn't get down to the bottom of the plant. They'll definitely thin if you do that. So make sure, so what we saw, when we see them done well, they're cut to whatever height you want, and then they're still angled down a bit. So that, again, they need sunlight down to the base. Let's see. If plants go through a huge stress, does it affect their performance after the event is over, like several years? It depends on the plant. So conifers can be really slow to recover from some things. If you don't change the condition of why the stress happened, so it could be you planted on a 95-degree day and it was a very root-bound plant, and then you went to the beach for 3 days and you came back and it hadn't been watered and it went through that stress. That stress may be recoverable a little quicker. But like if it was too wet or it was too cold or you didn't, the conditions don't change that caused the stress, then that could continue to have stress on a plant. If the plant goes through some issue, and I don't care, it doesn't even have to go through an issue. If you plant a plant and like 2-3 years later, it still looks exactly like it went into the ground, I'm thinking that's a plant that needs to be, or has gone through a stress and hasn't recovered. That's probably a plant that needs to be replanted. Maybe move it to another area in your garden or raise it up, or start questioning why a plant has done nothing over a period of time. By the second or third year, it should be growing for sure. If it's still sitting there, then something's going on with it. It's either too root bound, planted too deep, in the wrong location, it's staying too wet, it's staying too dry, something's going on with it. It may need a better spot. Can you overwinter sun patiens? So they had, because they're expensive plants, they took cuttings in water that rooted, but then they died when they planted them. I've talked about this in the past, that water roots are different than soil roots. There's a lot of plants that are capable of rooting into water and then getting oxygen out of that water and getting the things they need out of that water. That root is very different than the root that this plant roots down into the ground. Okay, and one is designed for the soil and one is designed for the water. But it's amazing that a lot of plants are capable of doing that. But it is two kinds of roots. So if you root something in water and then immediately move it over to the soil, if it lives, those roots probably died and it just rerouted new roots. Okay, so that, you're best to try to root them in soil if you can. Set up some sort of system where you can mist them, put them in some sort of covering, a little greenhouse type thing. But you're best to root them in soil and get the roots that will adjust to soil done. But a lot of times you can root something in water, and again, when you move it over to the soil, those roots die and then new roots form. But those water roots are interesting. But that's what you're doing. But yes, you can overwinter them, but get the cuttings done in a different way, and make some sort of little domed thing to hold in some humidity and root them in soil. Do we prune out suckers on tomatoes? I have shown desuckering tomatoes in the past. I only do it early in the season. Other folks will desucker tomatoes all season long. But basically, a tomato, it's a vine, right? So the vine comes up, and about every second leaf node, you'll get a new piece that tries to vine in a different direction. And it's right in the V, you'll get a new piece. That's called a sucker, okay? Those suckers can be popped off and rooted, just like those sun patiens, if you want to make additional plants, or they can be kept. By keeping every single one of those suckers as it goes up, the plant can become kind of unmanageable in time, start to just wrap around itself. It's like a vine gone crazy. I desucker mine in the early stages when I'm putting them on the cattle panels that I grow my tomatoes on, because I actually want the bottom of the plant to just be the main stem, and so air movement happens through there. Once they reach the top of those cattle panels, I let our tomatoes just go wild over there, and every one of those suckers is flowering just like the main plant, you know, the main trunk is flowering, and we're gonna get plenty of tomatoes. So I desucker almost until I get bored with it, but I want the bottom of those plants. I don't want all that extra growth down at the bottom of the plants where there's no air movement in my vegetable garden, if that makes any sense. So I do desucker tomatoes for about the first month and a half they're in the ground, and then I just let them become a wild thing above the cattle panels. Okay, and I can go in there and prune if I needed to. I can still do it. Even, it's easy to break them out when they're like this long. I mean, literally, they just snap out. And you can look at videos on my channel or other channels about desuckering tomatoes. Once they get bigger, you need to do it with a pair of pruners. Okay. Do we have any opuntia? That's prickly pear cactus. Some are very cold tolerant. I do not, and I think that's a plant that's going to outlive cockroaches. I've seen it on islands in the Caribbean growing out of brick, and I've seen it on the sides of mountains in the West where there's absolutely no water whatsoever. I just think that those prickly pear cactuses are, they don't need my help in my garden. That's what I'll say. They're really going to outlive everything on the planet. We saw some deer. Oh, that was at Rams. I think we showed some prickly pear cactus at Rams not that long ago, and the deer had figured out how to eat them without, you know, those little tiny spines and those things can get under your skin and they're really hard to get out. Okay. Are live oaks okay to grow in Raleigh? There are some spots here in Raleigh. The farmer's market has a couple growing in the parking lot at the state farmer's market here in Raleigh, and I'm amazed they're there because I see trucks brushing up against them all the time when I had my spot there. We have a live oak, a really nice one in a yard. If you came to the open garden, you may have walked past it on Fowler on the adjoining road here. It's a really nice live oak. So yes, I think it's one of those things that we are on the northern edge, really, of where they'll do well. You'll see them out in Norfolk for sure, and then, of course, south and east of us and all the way around to Florida and over to the Gulf into Texas for sure, and probably some other folks forcing them in some other areas as well that don't get cold. You got to get it through those first couple winters. I think that's the main thing. And once you do, they're fine once they're woody and have some size on them. That would be my answer to that. But we are definitely on the northern edge. But the one here, if you come to the open garden next year, I'll tell you where it is if you're interested and you can walk past it. It's a beautiful tree, and it's right here in Raleigh. And the two at the farmer's market, that's just three I can think of. There are others. There are lots of other live oaks in the city. But those are three that I know that just look fantastic. The two in the parking lot and this one over here. You got some age on them there. Tell me more about the plant symposium, any other events coming up. The only thing I'm scheduled to speak at the rest of the year is in the summer in Dallas at the Japanese maple event there. And then I'm speaking at the Charleston Garden Club the first of the year, and the Johnston County Extension meeting, and a couple other things early next year that are already on the agenda. But the rest of this year, I think it's just that one thing. I had a bunch really close together here. But the plant symposium in Raleigh is put on by Mark Wethington and Tony Avent, the J.C. Ralston Arboretum and the Juniper Level Botanic Garden, fundraisers for the two events. It has a rare plant auction. The rare plant auction is truly incredible. There's 500 and some plants this year. It was a big number, like 550 plants in the rare plant auction. Some of it will become commercially available later. They're just new plants, and then other things are just, there's only a few of them because they're really hard to grow in some way or another. And so that rare plant auction, all those funds get split between those two gardens. And so that's a lot of fun, just people bidding on plants, and they're bidding online and bidding all over the country, and they ship a lot of them out, and then people that are there for the event. So you can go to the event for the 2 days, and it's usually at the North Raleigh Hilton. It has been the last 3 years, It was in downtown one time and Cary one time, so it's possible it'll move, but it's usually in the North Raleigh Hilton. And then people can watch it on Zoom as well. But speakers from all over the world, I was included this year, but Denny Werner, who was on the channel earlier this week, was one of the speakers this year. Dr. Reuter, who at UGA, who's been on the channel when we talked about his plant breeding program at Georgia. Bree was a speaker. Bree has been on the channel before this year. It just happened to be a bunch of people that, a bunch of the speakers this year have been on the channel. But some of the people we've met there, we met Richard Hawkey there and then ended up filming with him at Chicago Botanic Garden. You know, it's a really cool event every year. It's a nerdy plant thing. So if you're a nerdy plantsman, it's for you for sure. I mean, there was a lady from China there speaking about, a doctor from China speaking about evergreen oaks. We just talked about live oaks just a second ago, our evergreen, southeastern evergreen oak. She was talking about all the evergreen oaks in Southeast China. So, you know, that's the kind of road you can go down. But then Kip McConnell spoke about the Southern Living Plant Collection. And I spoke about underused plants for the landscape. So it's a lot of different types of talks. Okay, it's a really fun event. And then we did not win a plant in that rare plant auction because just a couple weeks before that, we had gone to another event and won a couple plants in a rare plant auction. So my rare plant auction money funds were gone at that point. Do hostas and others that get hit by deer need any type of recuperative care? Easy for me to say. No, I don't think there's anything you can do about it other than wait and time. Most plants, you know, they've been in the ground for a minute and they've developed some roots under the ground. So just take this Weigela, for example. This has been in the ground for 4 years. If I was to cut it to the ground tomorrow, you think, well, it took 4 years for it to get this big, but it would take less than half that time for it to get this big again because now it has a big root system down there. So think about that. Your hosta or whatever it is has a much bigger root system when it initially went in the ground and it's able to recover a little quicker. Now, if it continues to get deer damage and it can't photosynthesize because it doesn't have leaves, that's problematic. But it does, the care it needs is for you to protect it from additional deer damage as it tries to recover. It only has a certain amount of recovery in it, right? But it'll grow back faster than you think. This person bought Sunshine Ligustrum and Loropetalum in Chapel Hill. Should they wait to plant after the heat or keep them in a container? The Sunshine Ligustrum can go in whenever you want to. There's a fly on top of the camera. I wonder if it's going to end up on the lens at some point. That's kind of funny. The Sunshine Ligustrum, because it's zone 6 hardy and you're in zone 7B, 8A over in Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill is west of us here in Raleigh and it's slightly colder. Typically 2 to 3 degrees some nights colder than it is here in the downtown Raleigh area. So that can have an impact, you know, on the plants that you're growing there and when you might plant them. Because Loropetalum being, you know, just kind of, Loropetalum is not something I want to fall plant necessarily in Chapel Hill the first year it goes in, you know, when it goes in the ground. I would rather get that thing planted sooner than later. So if you get any kind of break in these temperatures or get a period of time where it's going to be cloudy for a week, chance of thunderstorms for a week kind of deal, I'd get that Loropetalum in the ground. Sunshine Ligustrum doesn't matter as much because it's at least a zone and a half hardier than your area, so it can go in the fall and it won't be damaged in the wintertime. If using cardboard method to kill or block weeds and grass, what is the next layer, compost or bark? If you could afford compost, I'd put compost on top of it. And that way, again, it's always going to come down to me repeating over and over and over again, recreate the forest floor. So what does the forest floor look like? It's got the chunky stuff on top and then less and less and less and less chunky organic material down to what we would call compost or humus, whatever we want to call it, and then the native soil. So you've got your native soil, you're going to put your cardboard in to create this barrier to hopefully kill those weeds. Hopefully it goes away pretty quick because we don't want that barrier to stay. And then if you're recreating the forest floor and you have the money for it, you can go ahead and put the compost layer in and then put the chunkier barks or hardwood mulch or whatever you're going to put as your actual mulch on top of that. And then you will have kind of recreated those zones from the forest floor. Okay, so, but that's money related. I mean, if you don't have the funds to do that, then you put the cardboard down and then you could get free wood chips and you could put the wood chips down and then the wood chips will break down and form those layers. So like I'm on this wood chip path and the chunky stuff's on top, the slightly the stuff that's broken down is lower in those layers. So that's all we're trying to recreate. We're trying to recreate what you would walk out in the forest and find, which is chunky material and then finer and finer and finer material till you get down to the native soil. Okay, do we have any snakes? No, not really. I think at some point, I've seen a few more around the neighborhood, and I've got a neighbor 2 houses up that said he had a very large black snake this season, so I have not seen it. I would actually root for snakes in here. I think that you get an old neighborhood like this, and I think people have just killed them off over time. It makes no sense that there's no snakes in here. We have wooded spaces. We have all the right conditions for snakes, including being, you know, we have chipmunks that you guys will occasionally see going behind me, and baby rabbits and all the kinds of things that a large black snake would have a field day with. But I think people have killed them over time. So no, we really don't have any issues. My old house, I had, unfortunately, mainly copperheads. You know, I had the occasional, right before I left, when I had that house up for sale, I saw an eastern king snake. 23 years I lived in that house. And I literally looked at that snake and said, where have you been this entire time? And that's the snake I had wanted. It's kind of a white banded king snake. They're good at overpowering other snakes and eating. They're good at cleaning up the garden for you. Let's see. This person wants to try seed starting without a grow light setup. Will they have the same success? So you can do, there's a ton of methods for starting seed in the spring. And so you can use some of the outdoor methods that people do for seed sowing now in milk jugs. Some of that, you know, you can do them in bright lights inside, or, you know, the brightest window you have. The downside of not doing it with some sort of bright light is that they have the potential to stretch on you. And so you're starting out potentially with a very stretched out tomato plant or a very stretched out whatever. If you're denying them light, they're going to try to go get that light. And so you can end up with kind of leggy plants. That can be overcome during the growing season, so it's not necessarily the worst thing that could happen. But the reason I do mine with lights, and of course you can get smaller lights. You don't have to get those big giant 48-inch wide ones we have. You can also rotate the lights. We will at times have more trays than we have lights, and we'll rotate them like 4 hours under the light and 4 hours in a, you know, off the light kind of a thing, so that we can get equal opportunity light. So maybe you can just buy one and then, you know, a small one, and then rotate through that, rotate them through it. So that would be my you know, my suggestion on that. But again, there's a ton of different ways to sow seeds without having an expensive light rack setup like we have in the house for sure. Then they wanted our top 5 seed companies. This year we use Swallowtail, Pine Tree, Baker's Creek. In the past, last year we used Parks a lot more than we did this year. Way in the past, I would use more Johnny's, but Johnny's, the shipping is kind of expensive. But we're not afraid of searching the internet or, you know, going to retail stores and shopping for seeds at retail stores. And that's box stores, local garden centers, whatever. I mean, you know, we're equal opportunity. If I see something, if I see seed on a shelf somewhere, and we'll usually keep everything for 2, sometimes 3 years. So, you know, we have quite a bit of seed, and we, you know, put the date on. I'll put the date on it. That, you know, they have a date on the back for when they were tested. I'll usually make that date a little bit bigger on the packet, just so we know when we acquired them and how long they're supposed to last. And then we'll start doubling up the seeds and the cells later on, just assuming that the germination rate's going to fall a little bit in time. Anyway, we're equal opportunity seed acquirers, including maybe we walk through gardens and occasionally pull a seed off something, if not illegally, but, you know, asking somebody. Let's see. How do we clean our seed starting trays? Okay, so I got good at this at some point in the last 40 years, and I don't have any damping off, which is an issue of overwatering a bit and having where the seed germinates and then they die, or any of the other disease issues, usually in my seed starting. So I just kind of dry them off and knock the soil off and reuse them, which is not any recommendation you would get from anyone else. Everybody's going to say sterilize everything you do. But I only go back and sterilize things or dispose of trays when I've had an issue. So this year, we had a few things that just kind of were not our best. Our Gomphrena, we have a few out here that we did from seed, but we have way less Gomphrena than we had last year. Something was going on, either with the seed was too old or something was going on in our seed operation. So those trays, I'm either going to throw them away. We reuse those 50 cell trays a bunch of times, so I'm not that sad if I threw a group of them away, considering how many times I've used them. Or we can just mix some sort of bleach solution and clean them. We'll likely clean them. But this will be the first year I've sanitized probably in 5 or 6 years. And it was, again, it's based on the fact that I just hadn't had any issues. Now that I've identified a potential issue where I've got some sort of, in my system of seeding, either the soil or the trays or me overwatering them or something. I did something that allowed something to creep in. That flies on that. Yeah, there it goes. We did something. And so now I'm going to sterilize them this year. But yes, you can just sterilize them with a bleach mix. You can fill your wheelbarrow with, put some water in your wheelbarrow, put some bleach in it, and then, shake them vigorously in it. That should do the trick. Is Clean Sweep Snowbank Indian hawthorne still being grown? They can't find it. It is on Plants by Mail right now if you want to order it directly from them. It is being grown. There's so many guys that were growing, or nurseries, I should say, growing Indian hawthorne that had disease issues in them the last 10 years or 12 years. That fly is annoying. I don't know if it's showing up as he's walking across the lens. So many people who have had disease issues in their Indian hawthorns that a lot of them kind of stopped growing them. So then you're coming back to them and saying, I've got a disease-resistant Indian hawthorn. So it takes a minute, number one, you got to convince a person that you've actually got an improved product, and then they have to grow them out over some period of time. But I think you'll see more of that plant. If you were here for the open garden, you see our Clean Sweep Snowbank Indian hawthorn in the front garden. That thing's unbelievable. It's 18 inches tall, 3 feet wide, doesn't have a spot on it. I mean, it's unbelievable how clean that plant is. Clean Sweep is a good name for it. Let's see, Color Blends alliums. There's alliums here. Say zone 4A to 7B. Do ours do okay, or do we replant them? This winter, they did fantastic coming back. What happens next year? I think it's a year-to-year thing for us. That we could get, that we could have winters that are too mild and that they suffer from that. But a lot of times once something's a little bit more established, it becomes more reliable in time. So if you were here for the open garden, about 3/4 of the alliums were 2 years old or older, and then a third or so were planted this past winter. So we've been lucky with them, but yes, we are right on the edge of not getting enough cold treatment for the alliums. Somebody asked what the red flowers that were next to me over here last week were. That's the regular scarlet bee balm. So that's the straight species of scarlet bee balm. They faded quite a bit, but there are a bunch of bumblebees over there. Yesterday's video, you'll see bees on flowers out here. A lot of them were on these, what look like just really worn out bee balm, but the bumblebees are still going crazy for them over there. We got lucky this year. It was peak flower for the open garden. 3 days of 100-degree weather after people were here, and they faded quite a bit over there, but great. I mean, that's just a straight species. And, again, there's bumblebees literally on every flower over there. This morning, let's see. This person has river rocks as mulch. Would the compost tea work for me? So I talked about compost tea last week, and I just said, why not just use the compost, because then when you water, and then somebody said they use compost tea in the West because I guess they, getting less rain, and just use the compost here. But this person has river rocks. Would the compost tea work for them? Yeah, then it might make sense because you can't really, if you've got compost to use, you can't really, unless you pull those river rocks back, use the compost. So at that point, yes, I guess. Would it be beneficial? Yes, in some way or another, definitely. It's, it has nutrients in it. Is it necessary? I don't know. I don't know what your soil's like. I don't know what's going on under those under those river rocks. But yes, that would be the only way for you to use compost, would be to make a tea out of it if you have a rock mulch. What is the best container plants to combat heat and dry? So, you know, we kind of gone to that here in the garden, although we've got like 3 Japanese maples in containers. But in some of the other containers, we've got some of the South African plants, you know, the Lamandra back here. There's a variegated Lamandra. There's a gold Lamandra, that miner's gold, that people have asked about recently. We're using some of the plants for the Southwest. So if you keep that in mind, if you want to use, things like agapanthus and again, any kind of grass-like plant that's from South America or Australia or the Southwest United States, those are going to be good candidates to grow in containers if you're going to take vacations away from your containers, right? Some of the annual flowering things, I've got begonias over there. Those begonias will, they'll wilt quick in a container if the container dries completely out. So yeah, that'd be my adjustment. It's just going to some of the things that you would see in a Southwestern garden as your container plants, and then you can get away with leaving a little more often. Let's see, this person has a 3-gallon Chamaecyparis obtusa nana gracilis, which is a dwarf Chamaecyparis obtusa. We have one in the front garden out there. How big of a container should they plant it in? So I would just plant barely bigger than the plant is. So if you buy, it was a 3-gallon one, I would get a container that's just maybe 2 inches bigger than that. I don't like to step, especially something like a conifer, I don't want to step that thing up into a giant container because you're going to potentially end up overwatering it. And I'm trying to restrict the growth a bit on my conifers in containers. And I don't have any conifers in containers this year. Everything is kind of transitioned into the ground. But we'll buy conifers in very small pots and then plant them into small containers, then slightly larger containers, and then slightly larger containers. I can get 3-4 years out of it before it transitions into the ground as a container plant. But I just want to barely step it up. I don't want it to grow really fast and get really big root system really quickly. I'd like to transition it over a few years. But I think if you put it in a container that's about 2 inches bigger, you can get a season out of it. And then you could pop that out and go slightly bigger in the future, would be the way I would do it, because I'm literally trying to restrict them just a bit so that I can keep, trying to get value out of the plant. If I can buy one, especially, the ones that come from Isley that you'll see at garden centers in the fall or winter are in little tiny pots. And so a lot of the conifers that are in this garden, we got them that way. It's very small plants, and we've transitioned them through. They've been 3-4 things for us until they end up in the garden. Okay, somebody was gifted showy stonecrop sedum. Google says it can be invasive. Should they get rid of it or plant the pot into the ground? Planting the pot into the ground won't do you any good because it actually roots into the ground as it goes. So as soon as it gets out of that, over the lip of that container and into the ground, it'll be rooted into the ground. So some of the sedums are very aggressive. This Chinese sedum we have under the palm tree back here, very aggressive. A lot of our other sedums are not. So it's a sedum by sedum thing. They're not that hard to get rid of. So that's what I would say. I mean, if you want to plant it, if you feel like 2 years from now, it's kind of getting a little bit out of control, this one right here, I can add. This one's about one of the faster things in the garden I can rid from the garden. So I'm just not worried about it all that much. Now, if you let it go take a half an acre before you go and address it, that's problematic. But if you plant it and then pay attention to it, it wouldn't scare me to plant that. I think that in a couple years, you can just start chopping it back to where you want to keep it. I said I was going to get rid of that, and I haven't gotten rid of it because I have found it once or twice a season. I can remove it very easily. Like 10 minutes, I can clean that up and put it back into a much smaller space than it is. Let's see. Somebody wanted to know our methods for noting info, cataloging information out here, and all those kinds of things. And we have, for the open garden, in the front garden and in the back garden, there was a little tray out here with drawings of individual spots here in the garden with all the names of the plants. And that's something Steph does and keeps. I think we're going to do an upcoming video at some point on how we keep all that information, because there are, you know, beyond the plants that we bought somewhere that we're just trying to keep the name of, there are other plants back here that we're trialing for folks, or trialing for ourselves and that kind of thing. So there's a little information beyond that. So we'll probably end up doing an actual video on that at some point. This person's they have a wooded area with a lot of native trees. They want to incorporate beds into the space with small trees, shrubs, perennials, how to begin the plan. I think the main thing is to get in there and make some sort of path system potentially. You know, if you go back and look at I did like 5 videos when I started this garden project. The very first video, I put the drone up and drew lines on the ground for where the paths were going to be. I think it's the most important part of knowing, of the planning of the space. And so I would go back into that space and see, hey, how would I like to traverse this in the future through this wooded area? Make some sort of path system that allows you to wander it easily. And then I would go ahead and wood chip, you know, that path for sure. And so that you have a walking path back there. And then you can begin to plan and think about you know, this is something that's in the Learn to Garden video series. Steph talks about having plants at the end of pathways. So if you're coming, you come into a path and there's a focal point in front of you, and then the path splits, and then there's a focal point at the end of that piece of the path and a focal point at the end of that piece of the path. And then, you know, so I would base all of that on the path system that you put in there, and then try to figure out then where you're going to put the interesting small, we did the video on 50 small flowering trees recently. Of course, I've got tons of videos on the channel for small shrubs. There was a video last year with 50 small shrubs. But that would be the way I would do it, as I would work on the layout first before you just start going in there and throwing plants in. I don't know if you're cutting out some of it, thinning it. Obviously, the order of things would be to thin it. If you need to thin it, you probably need more light in it if it's a really dense wooded area. So you may want to limb trees up some to get some light in there. So those would actually be the first things. And then potentially you could use some of that wood and material that you're taking out to form your trails. You could use them as the edge of your trails and then put wood chips in the middle. We were at Mark Wethington's house last night. We've been in a couple gardens over the years where people take large limbs off trees and then just use them as the edges of their paths and then to contain their wood chips. So that would be my strategy, was get in there and think bigger, think long term before you start getting plants. You know, if you jump right to plants, it's going to be much harder to plan for the other things later. Understory, you know, create some light in the understory and then put a path system in, and then you can start planting, you know, for interest along those paths. Okay, was a lot. Okay, last question for this week. I think this is like 22 or something. Let's see. New construction, they dug a hole to check the drainage. They filled it with water, and 48 hours to drain. So it is not, that's not a good sign for your for drainage on that lot for sure. They elevated some skip laurels 2 to 3 inches, but they're not optimistic. I think you're going to have to plant higher than that if your soil doesn't perk any better than that. So that's how they do a perk test for, you know, a septic system. You know, they'll dig a hole, fill it with water, and then how fast they'll fill it with water, let the water drain, and then they fill it with water again, and then see how long it takes to drain the second round. That's how they'll determine whether or not you can have a septic tank, or how many septic tanks can go in a certain area, septic fields can go in a certain area, that kind of thing. That's how that's done. But if you're 48 hours before the water drains out of the hole, that's probably, that's not great. I'm going to start thinking about maybe regrading some of it so you can get some higher space in it, and then maybe treat some of the other areas just a lower area where I let it be wild, potentially, or bring in wood chips on top of it, and then in the future be planting up higher above the soil, which is kind of what I'm doing here at this point. You know what I mean? It takes a while to get down to the clay here, and I usually plant small containers, so I'm rarely digging down to the clay anymore. We've added so much organic material on top of it, and the earthworms have turned it into the clay at the top into pretty good soil. So that would be my suggestion. You either have to do some regrading, or I would use the wood chip method and try to get where you're able to plant above that soil that just doesn't perk all that well. So there you go. Thank you guys so much. Again, last day of the $50 off the Learn to Garden video series and the weekly garden planner. Maybe I did it through the 1st, but I think it's just through today. New t-shirts. Thank you guys so much. I put an Instagram post on Thursday as you're watching this, and several people bought shirts already, so thank you very much for that. And ask questions down in the comment section below, and we'll get to those next week. Thanks for watching.